Now, welcome, folks. We are talking about progressivism at the moment. Now, do not forget, progressivism is the third in the series of educational philosophy. As usual, we have mentioned earlier, perennialism, essentialism, progressivism, and reconstructivism are the four approaches from an educational philosophy point of view. Now, progressivism is a philosophical belief that basically focuses on nature being present, and students learn best in real life activities, and most importantly they learn best collaboratively. Progressivism develops from the pragmatic. It's a very pragmatic philosophy. It's actually a backlash against perennialism and essentialism. Most importantly, if you the one of the most important paradigm shift is now the hierarchy of knowledge. If you have listened to the first two video recordings, we talked about how both the other group of philosophers view knowledge from a hierarchy perspective. Idealists, perennialists saw subjects like the classics, social studies, and philosophies or moral studies are being crucial cornerstones to the education system. Whereas essentialists saw the basics such as reading, writing, science, maths as being the cornerstone of their curriculum. On the other hand, the progressivists don't have a fixed notion of what subjects being important or not. They see all subjects horizontally. The only difference is students' interests and the functional at that moment of time. Now, most importantly, progressivists bring four arguments to the table. The four arguments that progressivists talk about is, most importantly, that reality is constantly changing. So one couldn't be fixated on the past because one needs to deal with the present, and in reality the present changes, so therefore the reality changes. The second thing is, particularly Dewey, the main proponent of progressivism, felt that it will be such a waste of time to focus on a fixed body of knowledge, because they were not going after the knowledge, they were paying attention to the way knowledge was acquired. The next cornerstone of progressivism is progressive emphasis on how to think and not what to think, and it's a major shift from essentialism and perennialism's point of view, that it was not the truth, it was the approach to the truth that is given prominence here. And finally, traditional education with the method of imposition from the side that the teacher is reception and absorption from the side of the pupil. See, basically, they saw this not from this equation had more than two sides. It was not a group of academics transmitting something and a group of students absorbing. They saw learning as a much more dynamic enterprise. Now, the main patron for this whole progressive movement is John Dewey. John Dewey if you're not aware of John Dewey, he's an American scholar who lived through the 1859 to probably somewhere around 1950s. He wrote extensively on psychology, epistemology, ethics, and democracy. Now, one of his early work that contributed a lot was The Origin of Knowledge. But his philosophy of education laid the foundation of progressivism. In 1896, while being a professor at the University of Chicago, Dewey founded the famous laboratory school to test his educational ideas. His writing and work in the laboratory school set the stage of the progressive education movement. Now, according to Dewey, the role of education is to transmit society's identity by preparing the young people for adult life. He was a keen advocate for democracy, for it is to flourish. He felt that education should allow learners to realize their interests and potential. Learners should learn to work with others because learning is isolation separates mind from action. So this is very important. Learning in isolation separates mind from action. According to him, certain abilities and skills can only be learned in a group. Social and intellectual interaction dissolved the artificial barriers of race and class by encouraging communication between various social groups. He described education as a process of growth and experimentation in which thought and reason are applied to the solution of problems. Children should learn as they were scientists using the scientific method proposed by Dewey. Now, the scientific approach that Dewey proposed are fivefold. The first one is to be aware of the problem. 2. To define the problem. 3. To propose a hypothesis to solve the problem. 4. To test the hypothesis. 5. To evaluate the best solution to the problem. Now, once again, you must not forget the fact that Dewey felt that knowledge is constantly changing. So therefore, if you focus on content, you are focusing on basically capturing. Let's put it this way: if I walk into a river on two different occasions, would I ever walk into the same river? I mean, I could physically walk into the river, but the water and things like that have changed because the water continuously flows. So if I walk into the same geographical location twice, I will never really walk into the same river because the nature of the river has changed. The water has changed. The water that I come in contact with has changed. So what Dewey took this idea and he emphasized that catching knowledge, or the so-called the truth, is something like going to the river and trying to catch the same water. You can't catch it twice. What was important was that I had to identify certain processes. So what Dewey's first principle was bringing students to be aware of problem within society or within the body of knowledge. Having given students the power, the vocabulary to define the problem. Giving students the ability and the problem solving skills to propose hypothesis on how to solve it. And having them going through a process of testing it, evaluating, seeking for evidence whether the hypothesis has any validity or not. And most importantly, teaching them the notion of being critical to evaluate the best solution to the problem. Because he believed that if the process is right, then regardless of the content being constantly changing, wouldn't be an issue to the students.